Welcome to the Future of Surrogacy, the podcast that explores the people, the innovations, and the ideas building the next generation of surrogacy. So, as we close out the year, we're doing something a little different. Instead of a full interview, we went back through every single conversation we released this year and pulled the very last question we ask every guest: if you had a magic wand, what would you change? It's one of my favorite questions, not just because it invites honesty, but because it reveals patterns. Across our 11 guests who are agency leaders, attorneys, technologists, and more, there are recurring hopes, recurring frustrations, and recurring visions for how this field could evolve. So what you're about to hear is a montage of those answers. As you listen, notice where the themes overlap. These are the things that matter most to the people shaping the future of surrogacy. And who knows, maybe it'll help guide your 2026 priorities. So here's a special look back at the magic wand moments from our guests in 2025. And as always, thank you so much for helping us become one of the fastest growing podcasts in surrogacy. Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay, last question for you. I am giving you a magic wand, and you can change anything, but it can only be one thing about surrogacy. What is the thing that you change?
I really, that's a hard question because what we want in surrogacy is we want more women to take the chance and come forward and have the experience. So I guess if I could change one thing, it would be maybe a lot of society's misconceptions around surrogacy.
Do you feel like society at large judges surrogates?
1,000%.
Oh, okay.
1,000%.
Wow, okay.
There's a lot of you're just doing it for the money comments. There's a lot of passive aggressive things like, oh, I could never hand over my baby. One, it's not your baby. And two, now you've just made somebody who's doing something so beautiful sound like a horrible person and heartless because she's going to carry a baby for 10 months and have no problem handing it over. That was the most exciting part to me, was handing the baby to the intended parents. Yeah. Well, okay, here's my magic wand. Nobody's going to agree with this.
Okay.
I would love social media to go.
I don't know if no one would agree with you. I think you could start your own tribe. You think it does a disservice in surrogacy?
It does a disservice to the world in general, I think. And in surrogacy, there's a corner of it that is doing a disservice. Yes. There's a corner that's not. Obviously, there's, some really, really nice supportive groups. Like, yes, we have a private Facebook page for just our surrogates that is a very safe place. But you will find that even the safe surrogate groups or safe support groups or safe space, none of them are safe. And if you go in those groups now, you will see 90% of people are now posting anonymously because that's how unsafe that world has become. So if it could just go away and we could reset without social media, that would be my
That's a great one. That's a great magic wand. Okay, if you had a magic wand and you could change anything, what's the one thing you change in surrogacy?
There are two things, maybe three.
Uh-oh.
I'm working on one of them right now. I think affordability is the number one for me and the intended parents. It's really difficult when you know that they're on maybe 2 or 3 of their last embryos and they're running out of funds. And we all are hoping this transfer works, because if it doesn't, they may not be able to financially afford to keep going.
Yeah.
I would love to make this more affordable, more attainable. So, and I know some agencies, it's interesting because I'm seeing some agencies go the other route and they're like, well, we're just going to focus on the uber wealthy, charge a ton of money, and that's going to be our niche. Which, to each their own, if that's what you want to do. I hope that's working out for you. But there's so many people who deserve to be parents who aren't millionaires, who are hardworking citizens, who are teachers and, not making the highest amount of money. They all are deserving. And so if I could wave a magic wand, that would be my number one, is just making this affordable and accessible for everybody.
Are there any, oh man, if we could all just blank, that would wipe, 20% of the cost out? Like, do you see any opportunities for that as of right now, or it's just more of kind of a dream?
I think it would rely on health insurance to cover surrogacy more, to cover the reproductive endocrinologist working with the surrogate. And I think the bulk of it, which a lot of people think the bulk of the money goes to the agencies, which really isn't true. The bulk of it goes to the surrogate, which is very deserving. She deserves what she's receiving. So I think health insurance stepping in is part of it, but with that comes more complications, which, we may not want to get into. So it's more of a dream at this point, but I'm really hoping a genius comes along and is like, I found a way to make it accessible for everybody.
Okay, that's number one.
Number 2 would be that every transfer would work the first time for everybody. That would be wonderful. If I could just make that happen, I would love that. It's very hard to see couples come in with a history of loss and trauma, and they really feel like surrogacy is the golden ticket for them. And there's no way it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's always very difficult to have that conversation with intended parents. I think it should happen always, no matter how hard it is, to tell them we can do everything we possibly can, but it doesn't guarantee that it will work.
Having been through that, I remember like when we signed up to do IVF the first time, I was like, oh, okay, now we'll have a baby.
No, yeah.
And 3 cycles later, nothing.
Yeah. And then you're spending so much money on top of it. It's like insult to injury almost. So those are so tough.
Yeah.
And then the third one is, I believe intended parents need more support. Surrogacy is a very pro-surrogate environment, which I think, again, very appropriate. Surrogates deserve support and appreciation for what they do, me being one of them before. But I think agencies do what they can to make intended parents feel supported, but I think we lack a sense of community for intended parents. Agencies can only be there via phone call and email so much. I think if we can build a better community and education system for intended parents, this process wouldn't have to feel so lonely or so daunting. I know everybody's very private. We have a lot of clients who don't want to post publicly or share information publicly, which I'm always very respectful of. But even if you want to stay private, there's a way to build community. So I would love, and it's something that I've been really looking into in a small way. I've been working with a lactation consultant to provide education to intended parents on what the surrogate pumping looks like. Can they induce lactation themselves? Because I think that's very complicated when you've never given birth yourself or where you're same-sex male couple. So I'm working on an educational piece for them, but there's so much more that needs to be done as far as just a feeling of support and community and that you're not alone.
Okay, last question. We call it the magic wand. So here's the question. If you had a magic wand and could change any one thing, what would be the one thing you change?
I would force insurance companies across the country to all have to cover surrogacy without discrimination against women based on their mechanism of conception. Why they're pregnant should not matter for insurance, and it should cover everything fertility onward.
Wait, explain that a little bit. So you're saying because if a surrogate chooses to get pregnant and she says that she's pregnant because she's a surrogate, they might not cover the journey?
You have some states with discrimination, yes.
Oh.
And we've got California, for example. I'm in the middle of lobbying a law change there to get rid of the discrimination. What they're doing is they're putting liens on the surrogate's compensation. If I had a magic wand, it would be IVF coverage for everybody, and it does not change or discriminate based on the fact that she's a surrogate versus an intended parent doing it for themselves on their own body.
Do clinics want insurance coverage? Because I know that would put
Oh,
some
yeah.
pressure on their rates. Oh, they do. Okay. Because more people, it would open it up for more people.
Yeah.
So they'd make it up in volume. Okay. Okay. So magic wand question.
Okay.
If you had a magic wand and you could change anything, what would you change in surrogacy?
I think this might be a controversial answer, so we'll see. I would regulate the surrogacy industry. I come from the banking world where you cannot do business with anyone that you do not have a full KYC, as we call it, know your customer, which means I've seen their photo ID, I've done a soft credit check, I've done a fraud flag, I've done a government watch list flag. Like I know who this person is, and it is quite wild to me that we are doing these incredibly high cost, high risk journeys without often knowing who we're working with at a deep level. Banking is kind of a gold standard of there's so much possibility for bad actors in the space.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that everything is really, really buttoned up. And I think that in surrogacy, I don't think this is an intentional thing that any agency is doing. I don't think they're dropping the ball on purpose, but I do think that everyone is so overworked, everyone is spread so incredibly thinly that it is easy to say, okay, well, these guys seem like good people. So on vibes alone, we're going to move forward with them. Obviously, there's some background checking happening with surrogate candidates. You're pulling their medical records. Not sure it is enough to know that a surrogate is not under financial duress by just seeing if she's on government assistance or not.
Yeah.
To me, with my finance brain on, you need to pull a soft credit check to see if there's been any bankruptcies, if there's any debt. And so I think having more stringent like background checks of IPs and surrogates and maybe of agencies, because I think we've seen in the press recently proof that there are bad actors across the whole space on every single side of it. And I think the more that we can do to prevent that from happening, the better, ultimately. Like it's, obviously the majority of people going through the surrogacy journey are wonderful, incredible people, but you have to think like a fraudster to build systems that catch fraud.
Okay, so I call this last question the magic wand. And if you could change any one thing in surrogacy, what is the thing that you would change first?
Okay, though that's a hard question because you want to change a lot of things. But if I had a magic wand, the first thing that I would probably change is the legal aspect of it. I just wish that there was a legal framework for all countries that surrogacy could be legal, and for people that are unable to have children on their own would have this opportunity regardless of, their status in life.
Well, first of all, I think that's a great magic wand. I'm curious about this because for the fact that surrogacy is illegal, and I'm not trying to equate a baby to a kidney, but when you think about an organ donor, like I have something that belongs to my body that I want to give to somebody else. I wonder if anybody in surrogacy has ever pursued the case law around organ donorship to surrogacy in terms of framework, for making it legal everywhere.
You have a good point, and I see your point. I just don't think that it's seen that way because
That's a baby, not a kidney.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I see the logic. I see the logic there.
Are there people that are advocating for that internationally? Because I know that there's different groups like the Quad A in the United States is really active in terms of legislation around surrogacy. But is there an international board doing anything that you know about?
Or would it,
Okay, great. All right, here it is, the magic wand.
I've been waiting for this question.
Yes, if you had a magic wand and could change one thing in the ethics landscape of surrogacy, what would it be?
This is such a hard question, mainly because it's one. So if I was going to just pick one item that I wish was definitely different, I probably would say required background checks for all parties. Surrogate, partner, intended parent, partner. I truly believe that they all should have background checks. And I would probably, in a fantasy world, if it didn't bring a whole lot of other, I would probably want, fingerprinted Department of Justice level background checks.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful, and I'm actually surprised it's not required.
Having been an adoptive mom and gone through that home study process, I am actually surprised that the government hasn't stepped in that regard. But I do think, and I do know that it is recommended that we have those background checks, that if they were required, and there are some counties that do require that, I think that that would change some landscapes for sure.
I think so too. Just as an anecdotal example, one of the things that we saw in the adoption landscape is because of some of those background checks run, like we had people that looked amazing on paper.
Yes.
But you know, I will never forget this family. This incredible on paper or couple, both doctors, amazing pedigrees, lovely social skills. I mean, they're the kinds of people you're like, whoa, like you're kind of intimidated by them. And this diligent social worker had just a spidey sense about the woman. And in background checks, she had active cases open with CPS. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that that's a thing. And I do, again, it's very hard to stop someone who is intent on.
Yes.
So, yeah. I know that the background check requirement is probably, there's probably more than one person that's surprised that that's going to be my answer, but I just think that there are some bad seeds that would have been, or bad apples that would have been caught.
Yeah, I agree. And it's such a, especially with technology, it is such a simple thing to do now, and takes no time whatsoever. And it's, you know, 3 fields that people have to fill out now. So it
Even
is.
if you were doing Department of Justice and going in for fingerprinting and it was more of a hassle and all of that kind of stuff, I'm telling you for sure there would have been some people that were caught that are involved in things that have come up. So it's I just don't know. It kind of gets into the intricacies. How do you require that, but then kind of keep government out of privacy and body autonomy? Like you said, we could talk about that for like 3 hours.
I know, I know. Okay, magic wand. So if you had a magic wand and you could build one tool tomorrow to transform surrogacy, what would it be?
Man, I'm a sucker for data. Have lived my career in tech and data, so I gotta go with something there. Yeah, I think the way the industry currently is, very understandably, people are protective about their competitive edge. And oftentimes that results in being kind of cagey or competitive about your data. And it doesn't even have to be identifiable data about surrogates. You don't have to share your surrogates. And I would build a tool, if I had a magic wand, to share trends, patterns, things that can help the entire industry as a whole, like the rising tides lift all boats situation. And we've been at Simbi, we've been talking a lot about like the problem of data in surrogacy, and so we've been doing a lot of research, and pretty recently we came across the TEFCA model that exists in medical data, and it stands for a trusted exchange framework or something like that. But the idea is if you are drawing data from a system, you also contribute that data back. And so the general health of information you have that is helpful to everybody that's part of this system gets better. So you could do something like, hey, I figured that I think in my agency, we've noticed that candidates don't apply very much in December. That kind of stuff that doesn't really give away any candidates you have, but does help the industry overall.
Or demographic information. Again, like obviously nothing identifiable, but the patterns on the back end that could help to inform policies, regulations, or the right regulations. Because I come from adoption where they made the wrong regulations because they didn't have the data.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you let the lawmakers make the regulations without data, the
They're
regulations.
going to make the wrong ones. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, yeah, that's my answer for the magic wand. I would love to build a non-identifiable, you're not going to lose your competitive edge platform to share data and build sort of like a mutually beneficial space for agencies to kind of take the benefits of, rising tides.
Gosh, that would be really cool to have a system where everybody was contributing to it anonymously. So it's not like they only did X amount of journeys. Nobody would see that. It's just the data around what you are doing would be submitted so that people, but then it becomes like, well, who gets to see, like who has access
It's
to
like
that?
this reminds me of this is completely different, but this reminds me of the travel platform that I'm part of, and we've talked about, like Kindred, right?
Yeah.
You can only be a member if your own house is listed on the platform.
Right.
So this is a home exchange platform for people who don't know. You can stay at people's homes. They're not Airbnb. You don't pay money for it. You pay credits, and you earn credits by hosting people at your own home. And so the general health and quality of people on this platform is just better. Yeah, so it's like a similar concept of, a close-knit community that is going to take care because they have a personal stake in it.
I like that as a magic wand, Shraddha. Okay, let's jump to the magic wand because I feel like I've kept you long enough. So if you had a magic wand, and I'm going to change yours a little bit because you're from the builder side of the house. So if you had a magic wand and could build one tool tomorrow to transform surrogacy, what would it be?
Be a tool that combines client-side facing services and internal facing services, and all what we do as a business into one platform. And that's a lot. And that would have to tie into the records collection, would tie into the escrow service, would tie into everything. Or basically you have a dashboard and you have every bit of data you need to talk to that client, to know what's going on with their case, to make a decision within their case. Like if you have all that in front of you, because the more information you have, the better informed you are, the better decisions you make. And you need AI in it because really the amount of data, like I said, we have 300 plus steps in our workflow. The amount of data we collect is huge on each person. And to understand that data and combine it into a system where it makes sense, would need some AI kind of like pulling and understanding and sorting. Another thing we do, which we haven't talked about, is we do psychological surveys on our clients.
Like Myers-Briggs style?
It's similar. It's not Myers-Briggs, but it's something else. I won't say what it is, but and then we use that data as a secondary for matching, not only matching, like we look at it and go, okay, we think they'll be a good match. Let's see what our brains don't know that what AI might know.
Interesting. That's so funny. That the company I started prior to this one, we did personality-based matching. And so we did it based on archetypes.
Yeah. It's basically 2 questions. And you pick out all the things that describe you in those 2 questions, and it spits out this very accurate picture of, and then I think more important than the matching, when we have a client that is running into some difficulty, frustrated, upset, we can look at that and go, okay, this person likes to be talked to this way. This is how their communication style is.
Yeah.
This is what's going to make them mad. This is what's going to make them feel safe. So we have all that data, and we can take that with our team, and if our team talks to them, they can actually come to that client with an understanding that probably very few people have that don't know them.
Wow, that's really interesting. Have you ever heard of the company Empathic?
No, I haven't heard of them.
Okay, I'm going to send it to you. You got to look it up. My friend Grin Lord started it. And so her business is around, she kind of sits as like an AI interface over any kind of employee communications. And so when people are sending an email to another person in the team, or they're sending it externally to a client, Empathic does a pass, because a lot of people be like, hey, I need that report. And Empathic will be like, hi, how are you? Like it'll be like, hey, these are human to human, but using that kind of filter as with your personality type would be really interesting.
Well, yeah, and where we need to bridge at is we have this data in this set, and it's a very proprietary data, and so we get an actual separate piece of data that we can't directly import into that system. So to have all those, excuse me, to have all those systems together in one place, I think your client experience, because really in the end, whatever data and tech you bring in, you want it to enhance your client experience, not to detract from it. So I think something like that, where you have just the ability to look at what's going on in their case, understand it in a way that, that every employee can understand it the same if AI is helping interpret it. Like, did you think about this thing? Did you think about that? You're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Yes.
That's going to give that client a really good experience compared to like maybe approaching them with with something very succinct when they were very long-winded, or vice versa.
What was your quote again? Because this is exactly that.
Yeah. Technology must support and serve the relationship.
Yes. Like that is where technology is phenomenal, and in terms of synthesizing and analyzing and then helping the humans make the best decisions or take the next action.
Yes.
Yes.
So if AI can look at your data and go, okay, you've had 400 cases over the last X amount of years. We've looked at all that. And given how this case is going, you probably should do this, because if you don't, you're going to end up with this scenario again. And that didn't work out very well for us. So I think technology has a lot of place in supporting what we do.
Last question, and we call it the magic wand
Magic
question.
wand. Okay.
If you had a magic wand and you could change anything about SEO or geo, what do you change?
I seriously have been trying to do this anyways. Losing battle is to stop stop lumping SEOs in with geo. It's a completely different discipline. It's totally different. The audience isn't the same. The people using it, how it works is not the same. We're in a different, it's like I said, it's a wild, wild west. So we're learning. SEO is very keyword driven. It's very technical. Our algorithms have a checklist as long as you go, it's very linear. Like as long as you meet this checklist. And so it's really easy, the barrier to entry to learn SEO and to be a search engine optimizer for companies is quite easy. But geo is a completely different beast. Totally different. The only reason I know anything about it is because I worked at GitHub while Copilot was being developed. So yeah, companies need to, if I could wave a magic wand, SEOs need to stop saying they know geo because they don't.
One final question for you, and we call it the magic wand. So the question is, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing in terms of how agencies and attorneys work together in surrogacy, what would it be?
Would say bring us in earlier.
Okay.
Just bring us in a little earlier.
And 15 weeks, when a GC is 15 weeks, that's the
Get going on parentage. That's right.
Okay, that's helpful.
The other thing I'd say is don't set the legal fees. Like you need to understand my fee in Georgia may be different than somebody's fee in New York, may be different than Virginia. So, ask. I have people all the time and I love it. They're like, can you send me a fee sheet? Sure. Here's what I charge. Here is what you can expect to see from me unless the law changes in Georgia. And so that's much better than telling somebody it should cost X and then them coming and finding out actually costs double X, right?
Right. That's never a surprise that anybody wants.
No. And I'll just say fair warning. I do these at flat rates. I think to do them hourly, that's not industry trend, industry standard, if you will, at least not in Georgia. Most people have figured out what it costs, how much time it takes, and they can do it that way.
And so are you saying that's a red flag if an agency is looking for an attorney, like run if you see somebody telling you it's going to be hourly?
I should have said this was my magic, what'd you call it?
Your magic wand? Yeah.
Use quad A attorneys.
Yeah.
Like use quad A attorneys that regularly practice in this area. That the hardest cases I have are where there are people that family law attorneys, they'll just say, I do family law. I can do a contract. And can you send me a contract? Can you get one off AI? No, you cannot. It is not something that can be generated through AI. It is going to be wrong if it is.
Yes.
And here's another thing, and this is similar to adoptions because people used to say, can you send me a form for this? Well, I don't really have a form contract because my contract is going to change based on the circumstances of each and every case. So I heard a story when I was at a conference a while back where an attorney said she got a contract to review on behalf of her client. And as soon as she looked at it, she's like, this is my contract. And she said, I wasn't upset because it was my contract, but it was my contract that was 4 years old. We are constantly updating our stuff. Like we go to a conference, we come back, we sit down and we say, what do we need to put in, take out? I did Seeds did a podcast yesterday that I watched, and I have 10 points of things that I learned yesterday from an escrow agency's point of view that I'm going to put in my contract. So it's just not safe to just go find one and use one. Get a mentor. Ask somebody that does this regularly. Hey, could I help you on a case? Can I do some small things for you on a case? Could I sit in on a review with you? And then potentially, can you share your contract? Now, don't start with, hey, I want to do this area of the law. Will you share a contract with me? That won't go over.
Yeah. Or steal one online that's 4 years old. Yeah, I can see how that would be huge.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Okay. Well, you can have those two magic wands then.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to jump to our very favorite question. We call it the magic wand. And so if I gave you a magic wand and you could change one thing about how technology is used or escrow is done in surrogacy, what would it be?
If I had a magic wand today and I could fix one thing that is actually achievable today, I would want to achieve an education to where people coming into our space could get the information and process the information to where they knew the difference between good and bad providers. I think I get so frustrated. And look, this is hot off of me working with multiple families today that got taken advantage of. And I'm really emotional about it. So, but if those families had just a little bit of education and they truly knew how to select the right provider, in this case, escrow, but it could apply to agencies, it could apply to doctors, right? If they just knew exactly who to pick and why, and what questions to ask, so they actually could go through this beautiful and amazing process securely, I think that'd be really impactful.
Thanks so much for listening to The Future of Surrogacy. If you liked today's episode, send it to a friend or a colleague that should hear it. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn to keep up with new episodes and behind-the-scenes updates. And if there's a topic you want us to cover or someone you think we should talk to, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time.